Hey, welcome to the first video in this channel. I just thought it might be fun to try something. So I'm just trying to learn a bunch of stuff, and so I just thought I'd just share it with you. Maybe one each day. We'll just see how we go. I'll try and keep it short, maybe like 10 minutes or something. So a couple of general concepts of just things that I've heard today that I think is cool is the concept of being a producer, not a consumer. So not substituting consuming a skill that you should be practicing. Another one is anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, which is a cool spin on the usual phrase. And I guess it's implying that anything that's worth doing poorly is because you have the intention of that becoming a skill that you're working on to become proficient in. And so it's worth being bad at it or doing it poorly for a period of time. Failing is scary. Wasting your life is dangerous. So this is a quote from Guy Ross. And it's a cool concept. It's kind of just speaking to not living a life that seems safe because it's actually dangerous because of everything you're potentially missing out on. And then just an interesting fact is last year, in 2020, the online retail industry jumped from 14% to 20% of the US GDP, as you kind of expect. But it's interesting stuff. So the first one is, or the first general thing I'd like to talk about is BARDA, something I heard about today, which is a Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority in the US. And so they're basically responsible for procurement and development of medical countermeasures against like bioterrorism. So it's stuff like chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and then other stuff like pandemics and emerging diseases. So they fall under the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response, which is an interesting title. And then that falls under the parent organization of the US Department of Health and Human Services. An interesting fact related to BARDA is that chicken eggs are actually used in the standard flu vaccine. I didn't know this until today. So the US, they've actually got chickens being housed in undisclosed locations around the country, ready to be used for the purpose of mass scale distribution of a flu vaccine if it was required, which is pretty interesting. And they actually can't disclose it because it's like a national security threat. So Rick Bright, he was at BARDA, and he was sort of working with the current US administration and making recommendations which were not along the lines of where they were trying to go with the pandemic, for example. And so he actually got the sack. But Biden actually came out recently and said that he's going to bring Bright back as part of his team in 2021. So that's pretty interesting. So UFC, so they've got a class action that I think it was in the 10th of December, the judge granted it, which is a lawsuit. It's like an antitrust lawsuit against the UFC. And it was originally filed in 2014 by some former UFC fighters. And so basically the suit accuses the promoter of acquiring and maintaining a monopoly and monopsony, sorry, which is basically like monopsony is like when there's just a single buyer, which is not usually the case. You don't hear it a lot, but in a situation where they're basically purchasing the long-term exclusive fighter contracts for these individuals, they also fall into that category as well. So within the MMA, there's not really anyone, there's no other entities or organizations. So it's just them. So basically what that means is the individual has no power. So there's an imbalance of power as well. So there's now 1,200, there's actually over 1,200 fighters who are plaintiffs on the case, with a potential payout across those individuals of up upwards of $1.6 billion, or up to. Okay, so that's interesting. So a couple of interesting people. Chuck Feeney, he's an Irish-American businessman and philanthropist. And so he made his fortune with a duty-free shoppers group, which he co-founded. And so then he went on to found the Atlantic Philanthropies, which is one of the largest private charitable foundations in the world. So he's currently 89 years old. And actually in September, just this year, he gave away $8 billion through his charities. And that now actually gives him a current net worth of $2 million, which is pretty amazing. Another interesting character is Elon Musk. Just this year, he added somewhere around 140 billion to his net worth just this year, which means he's currently sitting around 160. It fluctuates a lot if you've ever seen the Tesla stock each day, but that's sort of about where it's sitting on average. Another interesting person is MacKenzie Scott. So she's was formerly married to Jeff Bezos. I think they split in 2019. And she is best known as an American novelist and for her philanthropy as well. So her net worth is just under 60 billion, which actually currently makes her the second wealthiest woman in the world, which is pretty amazing. Erik Yuan, he's a Chinese-born American billionaire, and he's the CEO and founder of Zoom Video Communications, not to be confused with Zoom Technologies. And so he owns 25% of that company still. And so you can imagine this year that's been quite profitable for him. So he's 50, age 50, and his current net worth is 16 billion. And so the next one is Dan Gilbert. He was the co-founder of Quicken Loans, which is currently parent company by Rocket Companies. And so they actually recently IPO'd, and in August, I think it was. And that IPO saw him quadruple his net worth to 34 billion in a single day. So he's now, I think he's now worth just under 45 billion, and he's age 58. And so it's quite impressive. He is the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's cool stuff. Okay, a term that I hadn't heard until today, or a concept, I suppose, is QSBS, which is qualified small business stock. And so this is basically shares of qualified small businesses as defined by the Internal Revenue Code. So essentially that means, or the guidelines for that means it needs to be an active domestic operation within the US with gross asset at their original costs that do not exceed 50 million after its stock issuance. So, I mean, it's potentially favorable for investors for capital gains purposes. And so there's tax breaks that depends on when you purchase the stock and how long you held it. And then even investors who sell their QSBS before the end of the required holding period, they can actually defer the capital gains incurred on that just simply by investing the proceeds in another company's QSBS. So it's pretty cool. Obviously, it's incentivizing investors to invest in these smaller private corporations. So it's cool. It's just a cool concept. And so a couple of interesting tech companies is CartaX. They just create a form of exchange for private shares of unlisted companies. Might be good for individuals who have stock options and are looking to liquidate some of those or something like that, or you don't have that option but you'd like to invest into that. And so that's more peer-to-peer style. So it's nothing like the standard stock exchange. in that regard. Another interesting one is Readwise. Readwise, they send you a daily email, which basically resurfaces what they deem as the best highlights from your Kindle. So when you're reading your Kindle, you can highlight particular phrases or paragraphs, and it just resurfaces those. So after reading 50 to 100 books months down the track, you could be getting little reminders of stuff that you read, which could bring back ideas and concepts and stuff like that. It's a cool idea. And then the final one is an organization called Idealab, which was founded in 1996 and actually the longest running tech incubator. And so they've actually created 150 companies, and they've been a part of more than 45 IPOs and acquisitions. And the interesting thing about these guys is one of their current companies is Coinbase, who are due to IPO early this year, 2021, all things going well. And so this is going to be really interesting. This is a space to watch because Bitcoin specifically is very hot at the moment. It's hot on the lips of media and a lot of investors. So yeah, watch that space. A couple of ideas for you, a couple of concepts, some stuff that I've learned. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, appreciate it. If not, maybe next time. Hit the like button, subscribe. I'll see you next time.